Germany's most valuable financial technology company reported 1.9 billion euros in cash sitting in bank accounts in the Philippines and Singapore. The auditor certified those accounts for 4 consecutive years without once picking up the phone to call the banks. The banks later confirmed the accounts had never existed. The company was worth more than Deutsche Bank. It sat in the DAX 30, the index of Germany's 30 most important public companies. Pension funds held it. Analysts recommended it. The German financial regulator actively protected it. When it collapsed, it took 72 hours. 24 billion euros in shareholder value disappeared. The CEO surrendered himself to prosecutors and posted 5 million euros bail. The COO boarded a rented Cessna in Austria wearing head-to-toe Prada, paid the pilot 7,920 euros in cash, refused a receipt, and landed in Minsk 4 hours later. He now visits Russian intelligence headquarters nearly every working day. This is Wirecard. Wirecard AG began as a German payment processing company in 1999. The plumbing that sits between a credit card and a merchant. You buy something online, a payment processor confirms the funds, moves the money, takes a small cut. Not glamorous, not complicated. Entirely invisible to the person swiping the card. Markus Braun takes over as CEO in 2002. He is Austrian, holds a doctorate in computer science from the Vienna University of Technology, and wears the same outfit every day: black turtleneck, dark suit, in what will later be described as a deliberate imitation of Steve Jobs, but which, in person, reads more like a man who has eliminated all decisions that do not interest him. He speaks in the controlled, recursive sentences of an engineer who has rehearsed what he will say before he says it. Under Braun, Wirecard grows. It acquires smaller payment processors across Southeast Asia. It signs up online gambling operators, forex brokers, pornography merchants, the categories that major banks prefer not to touch because the reputational risk outweighs the margin. Wirecard touches them. The margins on these transactions are high precisely because the clients are difficult. And Braun understands that a company willing to serve the clients nobody else will serve can charge whatever it wants. By 2006, Wirecard is listed on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. By 2018, it enters the DAX 30, replacing Commerzbank, one of Germany's oldest banks. Its market capitalization reaches 24 billion euros. That number needs context. Deutsche Bank, the institution that has served Germany's financial system since 1870, that helped finance the country's industrialization, that has offices in every major city on earth. Deutsche Bank, at that point, is worth less than Wirecard. A payment processor for gambling sites and porn merchants is valued higher than a 148-year-old national banking institution. Nobody on the DAX Index Committee finds this strange enough to investigate. Braun is on magazine covers. Wirecard is described as the future of European fintech. The company processes payments for 313,000 merchants across 26 countries. But Wirecard isn't done yet. The company's growth story depends on a model it calls third-party acquiring. Payment processing in countries where Wirecard doesn't hold a license directly, Malaysia, the Philippines, India, parts of the Middle East, is handled by local partner companies. These partners process transactions on Wirecard's behalf and hold the revenue in escrow accounts at Asian banks until it can be transferred. By 2018, these third-party partners account for roughly half of Wirecard's reported revenue. Half. They are the engine of the entire growth narrative. The reason analysts keep raising price targets. The reason institutional investors keep buying. the reason the DAX committee let it replace Commerzbank. The revenue from these partners flows through escrow accounts at OCBC Bank in Singapore and at banks in the Philippines. By 2019, the amount reported sitting in those accounts reaches €1.9 billion. The accounts do not exist. There are no escrow accounts. There are no third-party partners generating that revenue at the scale reported. Wirecard is booking income from transactions that never happened, held in accounts that were never opened, at banks that have never heard of them. The auditor responsible for verifying all of this, for confirming each year that €1.9 billion in cash is real, is Ernst & Young, EY, one of the 4 largest accounting firms on earth. Jan Marsalek is the other half of this story, and he is nothing like Markus Braun. Born March 15, 1980, in Klosterneuburg, a small town on the Danube just outside Vienna. His grandfather was in the Austrian resistance during the Second World War and was later suspected of being a Soviet spy, a detail that reads differently now than it did when Marsalek was growing up. Marsalek drops out of high school. No diploma, no degree of any kind. He joins Wirecard at 19 years old. This is a fact that deserves to sit for a moment. A teenager with no qualifications walks into a payment processing company in Germany at the turn of the millennium and begins a career that will end with him operating under cover names inside the Russian intelligence apparatus. At Wirecard, he rises. He is good with people, in a way that Braun is not. Braun, who sits in Munich reading audit reports and constructing financial models, versus Marsalek, who flies to Manila and comes back with a new contract. Marsalek drinks with clients. He tells stories that mix genuine intelligence gossip with inventions so seamlessly that nobody is sure which parts are real. He speaks multiple languages. He cultivates contacts in intelligence agencies, in governments, in the parts of the financial system that operate between jurisdictions where regulation is thin and documentation optional. By the time he is 29, he is Wirecard's Chief Operating Officer. His corporate biography on the company website will later state that he studied business at a university in Vienna. He did not attend that university. Nobody checks. On July 6, 2014, on a boat in the south of France, Marsalek meets a man named Stanislav Petlinsky. Petlinsky is an officer of the GRU, Russian Military Intelligence. What happens on that boat is recruitment. The details of the conversation have not been made public. What is known is the result. From that point forward, Marsalek travels to Russia on more than 60 occasions between 2014 and 2020. He uses 6 different Austrian passports to do it. In 2017, he travels to Syria to visit Wagner Group units in the field. The chief operating officer of a DAX 30 company, Germany's fintech success story, the company worth more than Deutsche Bank, is visiting Russian mercenaries in an active war zone. He comes back to Munich and sits in board meetings, and nobody asks where he has been. Nobody on Wirecard's board asks, because nobody on Wirecard's board wants to know. Nobody at EY asks why the COO's travel records show Moscow 60 times in 6 years. Nobody asks because the stock price keeps going up. And when the stock price goes up, nobody asks difficult questions about the man responsible for the half of the business that generates the growth. In the summer of 2014, a hedge fund manager named John Hempton sends a message to Dan McCrum, a journalist at the Financial Times in London. The message is informal. It says, roughly, "Hey Dan, would you be interested in some German gangsters?" McCrum is interested. He begins looking into Wirecard's Asian operations. the third-party partners, the transaction volumes, the escrow accounts. He travels to Bahrain. He finds that one of Wirecard's listed clients, a company that is supposed to be generating significant transaction volume, appears to be fictitious. The address leads to a small office. The company does not appear to process payments of any kind. He follows the trail to other partners. Some exist, but process a fraction of the volume Wirecard claims. Some appear to exist only on paper. He publishes a series of articles in the Financial Times in 2015 under the title The House of Wirecard. The articles raise specific, documented questions about whether the Asian revenue is real. The response from Wirecard is immediate and aggressive. Marsalek meets with Paul Murphy, an FT editor, and reportedly offers money to have the articles removed from the website. Wirecard's legal team files complaints with the German financial regulator. The company hires private investigators. One of the investigators Wirecard retains is a former head of Libyan intelligence. A former head of Libyan intelligence is now surveilling a Financial Times journalist because he published questions about a German payment processor's revenue. The stock dips briefly on the FT reporting. Then it recovers. Then it keeps climbing. The market's verdict is that McCrum is wrong, or exaggerating, or both. Because here is what happens when a journalist publishes evidence of fraud at a company that a government considers a national champion. The government sides with the company. McCrum keeps reporting for years. He publishes follow-up pieces. He contacts auditors. He talks to short sellers who have taken positions against Wirecard based on the same questions McCrum is asking in print. The short sellers receive threatening calls. Their research is publicly attacked. Their motives are questioned. They are dismissed as financial speculators trying to profit from doubt. In January 2019, McCrum receives 70 gigabytes of leaked internal Wirecard emails and documents. The material is a trove, internal communications that confirm what his reporting had suggested for 5 years. The Asian revenue is fabricated. The third-party partners are reporting numbers that do not match their actual transaction volumes. The escrow accounts cannot be verified. He prepares to publish the most detailed accounting yet of Wirecard's fraud. When he publishes on January 30th, 2019, the counterattack begins within hours. A Commerzbank analyst releases a note the same day titled "More Fake News." Thousands of bot accounts on Twitter launch coordinated attacks on McCrum and the Financial Times. The volume and timing suggest professional operation. An Indian hacker-for-hire firm called Beltrox begins phishing McCrum almost daily, sending tailored emails designed to compromise his email accounts and his sources. Beltrox then produces something worse, a fabricated whistleblower dossier. The document is designed to look like an internal leak. It includes surveillance photographs of short sellers taken outside their homes, images that could only have been obtained by someone physically following. The message is clear. We know where you live. We know where the people betting against us live. The German financial regulator BaFin receives McCrum's published evidence. It receives the questions about Wirecard's Asian revenue. It receives the evidence of fabricated clients and unverifiable escrow accounts. BaFin does not investigate Wirecard. BaFin investigates McCrum. In February 2019, BaFin does something it has done only once before in its entire history. It bans short selling of Wirecard shares for 2 months. The regulator responsible for protecting German investors from fraud uses its authority to protect the company committing the fraud from the investors betting on its discovery. Munich prosecutors open a criminal investigation against McCrum for alleged market manipulation. The charge is, in effect, that a journalist who published accurate information about a criminal enterprise was trying to profit from the truth. In September 2019, Chancellor Angela Merkel travels to Beijing on a state visit. During the trip, she personally lobbies Chinese officials on behalf of Wirecard's proposed acquisition of Allscore, a Chinese payment company. The head of the German government is advocating for a company whose revenue is fictional, whose COO is an asset of Russian military intelligence, and whose auditor has not called the bank. EY, Ernst & Young, certifies Wirecard's accounts in 2016, 2017, 2018 and 2019. Every year, EY's fundamental obligation is to confirm that the money Wirecard says it has is real. The critical question is simple. Does €1.9 billion exist in escrow accounts at OCBC Bank in Singapore and at banks in the Philippines? There is a procedure for answering this question. It is taught on the first day of every auditing program at every business school in every country in the world. It is not advanced technique. It is not subject to interpretation. You call the bank. You send a confirmation letter directly to the bank, not through the client, not through a third-party trustee selected by the client, but directly to the bank. The bank writes back and says, yes, this account exists, and yes, this is the balance. It is called a bank confirmation. It takes a phone call, a letter, and a response. An intern can do it. A first-year auditor can do it. It is the single most basic verification step in the entire discipline of financial auditing. EY does not do this. Instead, EY accepts documents provided by Wirecard itself and by a third-party trustee that Wirecard selected and controlled. The documents, screenshots, PDFs, statements that arrive through Wirecard's own channels, say the money is there. EY writes up the confirmation. The partners sign. EY's own internal compliance team notices something is wrong. In 2016, they launch an internal fraud investigation under the name Project Ring. The investigators find irregularities in the escrow account documentation. There are questions, specific, documented questions, about whether the accounts are real. By March 2017, with those questions still open, with 20 audit issues unresolved, EY signs off on the annual accounts anyway. They accept verbal explanations from the executives who are under investigation. Verbal, not written confirmations from banks, not independent verification from financial institutions. Spoken words from the men who stand to benefit from the fraud continuing. They do this because Wirecard is one of EY's most important German clients. They do this because the stock price validates the numbers. If the market believes, why shouldn't the auditor? They do this because calling the bank and getting the wrong answer would create a problem that nobody at EY's Frankfurt office wants to own. A phone call away. The answer was always a phone call away. OCBC Bank in Singapore will later confirm that Wirecard never held an escrow account there. The bank had never heard from EY. No one had ever written, called, or inquired. 4 years of certified accounts. €1.9 billion in reported cash balances. The auditor never made the phone call. June 18th, 2020, a Thursday. EY is scheduled to release its sign-off on Wirecard's 2019 annual accounts. The sign-off has already been delayed multiple times, originally due in April. The delays themselves are unusual. Major companies do not delay their annual audit sign-off unless something is wrong. EY's statement, when it comes, is one sentence that ends a €24 billion company. EY announces that it cannot confirm the existence of €1.9 billion in cash balances held in trust accounts. The accounts cannot be verified. The money may not exist. Markus Braun appears before the press that evening. He is wearing his black turtleneck. He reads a statement that will become one of the most analysed sentences in German corporate history. Wirecard, he says, cannot rule out that it has become the aggrieved party in a case of fraud. The CEO of the company that invented €1.9 billion is claiming that he is the victim. The stock opens the next morning at €104. Within the first hour of trading, it loses half its value. By the close, it is at €16. More than €20 billion in market value is gone in a single trading session. Pension funds, retail investors, index tracking funds that held Wirecard simply because it was in the DAX 30. That evening, June 19th, Wirecard's board fires Jan Marsalek. Marsalek does not go home. At a small airfield called Bad Voslau, 20 miles south of Vienna, a Cessna Citation Mustang 510 is waiting on the tarmac. The charter has been arranged by Stanislav Petlinski, the GRU officer Marsalek met on a boat in the south of France 6 years earlier. Marsalek arrives late. His taxi driver cannot find the airfield. Bad Voslau is small, private, surrounded by fields. The kind of airstrip you use when you do not want to appear on anyone's departure board. He is wearing Prada, light blue jeans, black leather jacket, black sneakers, all Prada. He carries only a small suitcase. He pays the pilot €7,920 in cash and refuses a receipt. The plane departs at 7:45 p.m. It crosses Austrian airspace, then Czech, then Polish, then Belarusian. It lands in Minsk at 11:07 p.m. local time. Marsalek crosses into Russia by car the next day. The border crossing is arranged by Putin's special envoy to Libya, a detail that connects Marsalek's escape not to financial crime, but to the infrastructure of Russian state intelligence operations in the Middle East and Africa. To cover the trail, Philippine immigration officials are bribed to fabricate entry records showing Marsalek arrived in the Philippines on June 19th. The false documentation is designed to send Interpol and German investigators to Manila, while Marsalek is already 5,000 miles away in Moscow. Back in Munich, June 22nd, Markus Braun reports himself to prosecutors. He is arrested and released on €5 million bail. The man who wore a black turtleneck and spoke in rehearsed sentences about financial technology is now a criminal defendant. That same day, Wirecard's board issues a statement that contains 7 words no public company has ever had to say about €1.9 billion. It probably never existed. June 25th, Wirecard files for insolvency. Total debt €3.2 billion. It is the first DAX 30 company in history to go bankrupt. From EY's announcement to bankruptcy, 7 days. Markus Braun's trial begins in Munich in December 2022. He faces charges of fraud, market manipulation, and breach of trust. His defense is identical to the statement he gave on June 18, 2020. He is the aggrieved party. He did not know. Marsalek ran the Asian operations. Marsalek controlled the third-party partners. Braun, the CEO, claims he was deceived by his own COO. The Munich court schedules hearing dates through 2025. Over 100 witnesses, more than 400,000 pages of evidence. Braun sits in the courtroom in his dark suit and says nothing to reporters on his way in or out. EY is banned from auditing public interest companies in Germany for 2 years. The fine? €500,000, a fraction of the audit fees it collected from Wirecard over the years it chose not to make a phone call. Investors launch a €6 billion damages claim against the firm. Dan McCrum, the journalist who first published the truth in 2015, who was fished, surveilled, threatened, and criminally investigated for the act of reporting accurate information, is awarded the Ludwig Erhard Prize for Economic Journalism in 2021. The criminal investigation against him for market manipulation is dropped in September 2020, 4 months after everything he wrote turned out to be correct. He publishes a book about the 6-year investigation. He was right the entire time. A government, a regulator, an auditor, a national champion company, and an army of Twitter bots told the world he was wrong. And he was right. BaFin, the regulator that banned short selling to protect Wirecard and opened a case against the journalist instead of the company, is restructured by the German government. Its president, Felix Hufeld, is forced to resign in 2021. And Jan Marsalek is in Moscow. Russian intelligence assigns him a new identity, Konstantin Bajazov, a name borrowed from an Orthodox priest in the city of Lipetsk who physically resembles him. Then another identity, Alexander Nelidov. Then others that have not yet been made public. His partner in Moscow is Tatiana Spiridanova, an FSB linguist and Middle East specialist. By 2025, Marsalek visits FSB headquarters at Lubyanka nearly every working day. He walks into the building with the yellow facade on the square, the building where the KGB interrogated prisoners, the building that Muscovites still cross the street to avoid. And he goes to work. British police release a photograph of him in full military combat gear. He is wearing a body armour vest with a Z emblem on it, the symbol of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In late 2024, 6 Bulgarians are convicted in a London court as members of a spy ring that Marsalek organised from Moscow. The cell exchanged 70,000 telegram messages with him between 2020 and 2024. He ran them the way he ran Wirecard's third-party partners, from a distance, through intermediaries, on platforms where documentation could be controlled. The high school dropout from Klosterneuburg who never earned a diploma, who built a career on charm and travel and contacts in rooms where nobody checked credentials, who told stories mixing classified intelligence with pure invention until no one could tell which was which. He found the one organisation on Earth where that skill set is not a liability but a qualification. He is not in hiding, he is not on the run. He is employed. €1.9 billion was reported in accounts that did not exist, certified by an auditor that did not check, at a company protected by a regulator that investigated the journalist instead of the fraud. The money was never there. The COO who helped invent it is now an intelligence operative for a foreign government. The CEO says he didn't know. The auditor says it followed its procedures. The banks in Singapore and the Philippines have confirmed what was always true. There were no accounts. There was no €1.9 billion. There was a phone call that nobody made, and a question that nobody asked, because the answer would have ended everything. The stock price, the DAX listing, the magazine covers, the state visit to Beijing. And the one man who did ask the question, a journalist in London who received a tip about German gangsters and spent 6 years proving it while a government tried to stop him, was treated as the criminal. The stock price